Okay, so now what do B cells do? Well, indirectly, B cells basically make our humoral or our blood immunity. Activated B cells can turn into what we call plasma cells. The plasma cells are what actually make antibodies. I'll have a picture coming up here in a minute. Those antibodies are what actually provide our humoral immunity. So, for example, when somebody gets a transfusion of antibodies from another person, that grants that individual humoral immunity briefly until those antibodies leave circulation. Don't worry about how that happens. Now, T cells, all right, so we talked a little bit about B cells. Remember, B cells occur in two groups. Okay, we have the memory B cells, and we have the plasma. The memory have been trained to remember all of the nasties that you've experienced in your travels through your life, okay? The memory B cells can be trained either through vaccination or through exposure. Plasma B cells make antibody, and it's the plasma cells that produce the humoral immunity. Now, T cells, different animal. T cells, these guys also come from red bone marrow, stem cells in the red bone marrow. They can also come early in life in the thymus, but they go and they live in the thymus, all right? So first, red bone marrow makes early T cells. They migrate to the thymus where they take up residence when you're young, when you're a baby, and they live there for a while. And so T cells can come from the thymus as well. So during stage 1 of T cell development, now remember, T cells, these are the killers of the immune system. They go around and they wipe out pathogens once they've been labeled by the plasma produced by B cells. We'll get into more detail in a few minutes. So stem cells develop, they kick off cells that will develop into T cells. So here's the deal with a stem cell. A stem cell will undergo division, and as it divides, it restores itself, it replaces itself. So SC is a stem cell. Over here, you have an immature T cell, all right? So every time the stem cell divides, it restores itself, but it kicks off a cell that's going to become something else, all right? And in this case, it's a T cell. So this occurs in the thymus during a few months before and after birth. T cells then migrate mostly to lymph nodes. They sit in there waiting for pathogens to come through. Crazy, huh? All right, stage 2. All right, so this was stage 1. Stage 2, what happens? T cells develop into what we call sensitized T cells. When they're sensitized, that means, they've been trained to look for stuff. And they do that by antigen binding. Don't worry about how that all works. You'll hear about that in Bio-18 and physiology at Merced College. Here is a quick figure to show you what's going on with stem cells for B cells first, okay? You have a stem cell in the red bone marrow. They divide to make B cells. Now, what I would say is this picture is showing 2 B cells. It makes one during one division. During the second division, it makes the second cell. The cells themselves, let me erase that. Oh, it's going to make me go through this business here. Erase these so you can read. Small lymphocytes, basically small, oops, I don't want to, although that laser pointer is pretty cool. Check that out. The lymphocytes with the antibody molecules on the outside migrate to lymph nodes, so they become activated B cells. B cells live in lymph nodes, remember. B cells, once they're exposed to something, turn into memory B cells. They live in lymph nodes, all right? They got to live somewhere. And if you're exposed to the same pathogen again and it heads through that lymph node, you have these guys here waiting to interact with them. We also have the plasma B cells. Now, memory cells can convert into plasma. They divide. They make plasma cells, and they can just keep dividing and making more plasma cells. They can not so much reconstitute themselves, but they kick off to make plasma cells. And the plasma cells make antibodies that are going to go and glue onto whatever the pathogen is. So let's say you have an organism, let's say a bacteria here. And it's really mean, right? Oops. I know I'm being silly, right? And this pathogen has little triangles on the outside, which match up with the antigen, with the antibody. Sorry, I meant to say antibody. So each one of these little triangles is the antigen to which the antibodies are going to stick. Remember, the antibodies stick to antigens. When this happens, it's like a Post-it note. It's labeling our pathogen, our microbe. Then our killer T cell here, okay, comes along and sees this. And when it sees this, it literally attaches to, there's a recognition process, don't worry about it. It attaches to the antibody and it says, ooh, I know that. Whatever this is stuck to, I don't like this guy, I need to kill it. And so it does so. I'll post a video showing immunity when I'm done with this. So functions of T cells is to go along and kill things, right? Kill invading cells, kill invading pathogens by releasing poisons and things that are similar to complement onto these cells. We're not going to go into great detail on that, but basically we call anything that kills a cell a poison to some degree. There are some exceptions. And the other thing it does is T cells will secrete a compound that brings macrophages in to eat up microbes. So the T cell can kill the invading pathogen and call in the cleanup crew, which is really nice. So a stem cell can kick off T cells here, all right? T cells migrate to lymph nodes, the liver and the spleen, they hang out there, also to the thymus, right? They came from stem cells, went to the thymus, hung out there. If they're activated, they come out and they come out through circulation. They hang out in the spleen, liver, lymph nodes. They can circulate in regular circulating blood as well. And they're ready to go. They're ready to identify the bad guys. So what happens when your immune system is oversensitive? Well, that's called hypersensitivity. And what that is a huge inappropriate response to something in the environment. We can also call that an allergy. An allergy is hypersensitivity to what's supposed to be pretty harmless, like pollen. Pollen doesn't really hurt us, but some people are allergic to pollen. I am. I'm allergic to, I don't know, I'm allergic to all kinds of things here in Merced. What happens when I breathe in pollen from almond trees is I have an immediate allergic reaction, which activates my humoral immunity. All of a sudden, my body thinks that I'm being attacked by something nasty, and really it's just almond pollen. So I have an immediate reaction. It's usually pretty strong. I take an antihistamine, though, and it dampens down the reaction. There are also delayed allergic responses, and we're not going to go into details on that, but sometimes you can be exposed to something and not show allergic symptoms until later. Now, autoimmunity, this is a really bad thing. We talked about this earlier. Autoimmunity is an inappropriate response to your body's own self-antigen. So remember how I said that all my cells on my body have the Dr. Val protein or carbohydrate modification, really, the Dr. Val marker on the surface? And a phagocyte or a T cell, here's my T cell, it comes along and it looks at that and it ignores it because it says, no, I recognize that. That's a part of me. Well, sometimes T cells don't pay attention to that. For some reason, they forget that our body cells belong to our body. So they attack and kill our own tissues. This is called autoimmune disease. One very severe type of autoimmune disease is systemic lupus, erythematosus. And so this is an inflammatory disease that's caused by B cells, actually. B cells are making, plasma B cells are making antibodies that tag your personal marker or other elements of your cells, and the T cells come along and say, hey, let me kill that. So B cells are acting inappropriately in this case. Isoimmunity happens when, and this is not a good thing, iso kind of means same, right? This is a reaction of antigens from another human. Isoimmunity is a bad thing, especially during pregnancy, when a pregnant mother's body recognizes or identifies the fetus as a foreign tissue. That usually happens because of the Rh factor. Mom would be Rh negative, but if the fetus is Rh positive, on the first pregnancy, it's not a big deal, but the mother's immune system looks at that Rh and says, yeah, I don't know what that is. That might be bad. And the B cells start identifying it as a foreign pathogen. On the second pregnancy, then the B cells find that Rh positive on the second fetus if it's Rh positive, and then the B cells start producing antibodies, and the fetus is actually attacked by the mother's immune system through regular pathways, but it all happened because that first exposure to Rh factor in an Rh negative mom. So Rh negative mom plus having an Rh positive child would demonstrate isoimmunity. This also happens in transplants. So if you get a transplant, if somebody gets a transplant from somebody whose tissue doesn't match well, that causes rejection syndrome. So immune system deficiency, normally it's pretty rare, okay? Immune deficiency, immunodeficiency, very rare. Usually if you do have congenital immunodeficiency, basically what usually happens is that lymphocytes don't develop properly, or stem cells that make lymphocytes don't make them properly during development. Severe combined immune deficiency, SCID, has to do with the disruption of stem cell development in the red bone marrow itself. So both of these have to do with stem cell development and lymphocyte production. Acquired immunodeficiency usually develops after birth, and so acquired immunodeficiency syndrome is caused by the HIV infection, and the HIV infection infects and kills T cells. And since the T cells have a huge role to play in immunity, they kill foreign pathogens. Once those go away, the ability for us to fight infection goes way down. So previous to exposure to HIV virus, an individual might be able to fight off a cold pretty easily. After that, a cold can very easily turn into bronchitis and eventually pneumonia and cause death. All right, you guys, we made it through lymphatic system and immunity. We'll see you in the next chapter.